Well, welcome everyone to our second interview in our Performance Management and Practice series. This series is sponsored by CPA Ontario's Centre for Sustainability Reporting and Performance Management. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce my co-host, partner in crime, Nancy. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. And then with that said, our guest of honor, Ben Jackson. Ben is a senior financial analyst at Axonify. It's a company headquartered here in Waterloo, offers SaaS-based training solutions. We're also lucky to have Ben as adjunct faculty here at the School of Accounting and Finance. So a number of you, Ben thinks about 100 of you, maybe experienced his teaching a few terms ago. So welcome, Ben, to our conversation.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, really excited to be here.
Let me get started, Ben, with some easy ones. We're gonna set these up so you knock them out of the park. Where were you born and where were you raised?
Yeah, I was born in Toronto, here in Ontario. Moved to Waterloo when I was 3 years old. Haven't really looked back. Lived in KW my whole life since then.
Oh, you're a homer, are you? That's great. When you were a kid, you said to yourself as a kid, I want to work in SaaS-based companies. I want to do accounting. I'm assuming that's how you were at 3 onwards. Is that the story?
Yeah, not quite. For a long time, I wanted to be a professional athlete. If you asked anyone, it was all about being a professional athlete. And then pretty quickly, probably around 10 to 12 years old, I realized that I was pretty average at a lot of sports, and that probably wasn't going to be a path that I could go down. So if you ask anyone, I then wanted to switch over to the management side of sports. And that's kind of where the accounting gears started to shift in, kind of when I was in high school. But my dream job for the longest time, still is, would be to be the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I've always said that. That's the dream job someday, and that's what I'm striving for.
Still young, right? You still got some years.
Yeah.
So you live in the city, you're thinking something management business-like, and why the University of Waterloo? Why the School of Accounting and Finance?
Yeah, I think it's really 3 things. I've had this question a lot, and it really comes down to 3 things. For me, it was between program here at Waterloo and a commerce program. And I liked the fact that this program was specialized. It had that accounting and finance specialization versus something that I thought was a little more broad. The co-op, I mean, that's the biggest seller for a lot of folks. Co-op is amazing. The opportunity to earn that experience over 4 times going through school and being able to back up what you're learning in the classroom and taking it into the real world was a big seller. And then I think the last one was the value of the designation. I was really lucky. My father's a CPA, CA as well. So I was able to see what he was able to achieve with that designation. Now, I wasn't really able to appreciate it since I went in the program and saw what it could do for someone, but my parents played a big role in helping me understand what a designation could do and open a lot of those doors and really become a differentiator in a lot of areas. If I wanted to do something related to sports management, which is where I envisioned myself early on, having that designation might be that way into the door, be able to differentiate myself from another candidate. So that was the main reason I liked UW, those 3 reasons.
So thinking your reason about the co-op. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you co-opt all of your terms at Axonify. What motivated you to do that? Did you set out at the beginning, I'm going to do all my co-ops at one firm, or how did that play out for you?
Yeah, I give the same answer to anyone who's ever asked me that question, and it really comes down to Axonify never gave me a reason to want to leave. I never intended to stay there the entire time. I wanted to try things out, but again, yeah, they never gave me a reason to want to leave. From the very first day I stepped in there, I was treated like I was a 10-year veteran, given tons of opportunity, tons of challenges that I was able to work and overcome without that fear of failure being a bad thing. When I first started, I started on the business operations team, which was a brand new team at the time. We were really scaling it from the ground up. I joined in January 2017 and the team started in October 2016. So it was really this process of trying to build something from the ground up and trying different things that might not have worked. Some did work, some definitely didn't work, but having that freedom to learn what it takes to scale that team up as well as the ability to learn, again, like I said, what works and what doesn't was huge for me. And then I think the other thing that kept me around was being able to try different things, even at the same company. So from my first term, it was all about scaling. The second term was still on that biz ops team where I worked on insights and providing insights and value for the company. And then for the last 2 terms, I transitioned over to the finance team, which was much more of a traditional finance, accounting, a little bit of legal in there, where more of those CPA skills, I think, came into play.
Well, that's neat. It sounds like Axonify was able to offer you that diverse experience that we typically look for as co-op, or we ask our co-op students to seek out. But it also seemed to create this mindset of experimentation, allowed you to be creative, even within a sort of a traditional accounting background. That's pretty neat. And so you come back for your master's here at Waterloo, and I suspect that relates to the idea of pursuing the designation. It just made sense. Is that how you found yourself in the MAC program?
Yeah, for me, it was never really thought of doing anything else. Again, one of the reasons I came to Waterloo was for that designation. The MAC I thought was the easiest, well, maybe not the easiest, but the fastest way to get to the CPA. The MAC is a challenging program. I know a lot of the folks on this call are going to be entering pretty soon. So it's the fastest way for me to get there. It was challenging, 8 months of really, really working hard and, buckling down and making sure I could do everything. But it was never really a question. The MAC was what I wanted to do from the start.
Let's dive in a little bit to that idea of SaaS. For maybe somebody who's just new to that space, what does SaaS mean, and maybe what does it mean to you? What is so unique or novel about that space as opposed to maybe a more traditional business model?
For sure. So SaaS stands for software as a service. So you're essentially selling out the software that you build as a service to someone else. So there's 2 different types that I classify them into. You have business to business SaaS, which is what Axonify does, which is where I've spent my career. And then there's also the business to consumer side, which I think people are more familiar with. So something like Spotify, when you're listening to music, that's considered a SaaS company. Something even like Netflix would be considered a SaaS company because they're selling that software to you as a service. For me, I think it's unique. And one of the reasons that I like SaaS is because SaaS values non-GAAP metrics just as much as GAAP metrics. There's this idea that tracking these metrics that are specific to SaaS companies, they're very valuable. They're what these private equity firms and venture capitalists base their valuations off of for these companies. So, I think when we look at traditional companies, it's all about figuring out these GAAP metrics and how do we compare GAAP metrics across different companies. There is that element in SaaS companies, and we're seeing it more and more as pressures become tighter to meet targets. But there's that element of being able to come up with your own metrics that mean something to you as a business based on how your business is created. So the biggest one that we track in the SaaS business is annual recurring revenue. So the idea in the SaaS world that recurring revenue is huge to you. So if we take a business that just sells widgets, let's say some physical object, you might sell one of that to one customer. There's no guarantee they ever come back. They might be a one-time customer. SaaS is so focused on creating this recurring revenue stream. And if you think about something like Spotify, if you have premium, that's the idea that you're continuing that subscription over and over and over again, and that it never stops. You're continuing to generate that revenue, hopefully forever. Hopefully that customer never leaves you. So it's that very different way to think about revenue that's not necessarily captured in GAAP revenue metrics, accounting revenue metrics. It really is its own thing. And one of the reasons that I love SaaS.
Let me pick up, Ben, on a question we've got in chat from Thalik. I'm going to reframe it a little bit because I think we're going to try and get at the different parts of the question. You and I could probably talk for hours on the different metrics. So ARR is one, and there's some other ones, and hopefully we'll get into the other ones later. But I want to bring you back to sort of that first co-op work term to where you are now, you would have seen different parts of the business and developed different skills and maybe different appreciation into some of those metrics that you wouldn't have gotten if you'd been, working at the widget maker, whatever that is. Can you walk us through what you saw as you progressed through Axonify that kept you coming back? So, what were some of the skills you would have developed in operations versus what you've now developed to be in finance in a SaaS company?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think early on, so it wasn't even, I think that the skills were one thing and being able to learn the skills was important, but I think being able to go into the company for a bit, step back out, go back in, it was interesting to me to see the life cycle of the company. When I joined, it was early 2017. We were 110 employees. Now we're coming up to 8 years later, we're 240 employees. So much, much different experience. And I think one of the big differences that I've seen is the change in the way that the company operates. And that was something that was exciting. When I first started, I loved the fast-paced element of it because it was literally, okay, how do we make sure that the company and then the individual team survive one more day, survive one more week, and make sure that it's something sustainable and we can grow. Now we're at the point where, especially when we're thinking about the upcoming budget season, there's very strategic conversations going on. Where do we see ourselves in 1 year? Where do we see ourselves in 2 years? So seeing that life cycle change has been exciting, kind of going in and out. So that's the first reason that I liked being able to go in and out. The second reason goes back to the skills that you were talking about. I think in the first term, a lot of it was building those skills and understanding why a SaaS business is different than a traditional business from a business operations perspective. So it was a lot of those metrics and learning why those metrics are important. How do we calculate those metrics? How do I get myself thinking and changing that thinking that I've learned in the classroom for 2.5 terms or 3 terms now, 2.5 years of school, where it's that traditional accounting where you're going through and everything has to follow these very rigid rules, transitioning from, okay, it's kind of up to us to make the rules at this point. You have to present these financial statements to investors and get audited every year. But a lot of these metrics and a lot of the decisions that are being made are based off of information that you're providing. So I think learning about that and how to frame those questions and frame those ideas was one thing that really brought me coming back. When I transitioned over to the finance team, I learned how to analyze a financial statement on a SaaS company. And it's vastly different than one of the things that you would see from a manufacturing business. In SaaS, one of the cool things is it's very scalable, because the idea of adding one more customer to your platform, it's not expensive at all to do. So we're dealing in a business and in an industry that has gross margins of 80 to 85%, which is just not what you're going to see in a manufacturing business, where a lot of our costs are below the line. So things like marketing. How do you make marketing more efficient? How do we analyze those numbers? Sales. How do we make the sales team more efficient? How do we make sure that when they're going out to meet a customer that it's as efficient as it can be, but they're still generating that revenue? Development costs, things like that are more pertinent to what we're doing. So learning how to analyze those statements, I think from a SaaS business versus what we would cover, let's say in class, was really important and a big skill I needed to learn.
How'd you learn it? Was it, Carol sent you to go look at a website? Was it, somebody walking you through this? How did you do it, and what might you suggest to a student who's interested in working in SaaS in terms of learning?
Yeah, a great question. I think there's tons of resources out there now learning about, so there's webinars, there's online pages that can teach you how to walk through SaaS statements and what to look for and the metrics you can calculate off of it. But I think a lot of it was, and it's one of the things that we talk about, especially in the master's course that I teach, is figuring out the whys behind it. So figuring out, okay, this is what happened. Why did this happen? So let's look at our gross margin as an example. Our gross margin might have decreased 1% last year. Why did that happen? So maybe we spent a little bit more on our customer hosting costs. Okay, why did we do that? Well, there's a bunch of things that go into the hosting costs that end up making up that total cost. So a lot of it was just being curious and being directed in the right places by my superiors and people that had been there a long time and knew what was going on. And then there's taking the initiative on your own to learn what it actually means behind the scenes through a lot of online research. There's tons and tons of resources out there right now.
So it's that answering the why question. And it's probably the understanding you gained of the business just by keeping your eyes open and being curious that helped you answer it.
Yeah, exactly. And luckily we're at a point right now where data is super important to us, and we track tons of data points, whether that's in our ERP system. So we use Sage Intacct now. I think the Axonify case that was written in 2017, they were still using QuickBooks and Excel. That's vastly improved at this point. So we have tons of data points that you can go back and you can segment our general ledger by months, by days, by years, by quarters. That really kind of allow you to dig in on data points and figure out the why behind everything.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I know a lot of our students have been taking more and more of the business analytics courses here. You mentioned sort of GL data. Are you digging into accessing other kinds of information to help you answer those whys?
Yeah, that's a good question. So maybe it kind of helps to walk through how we deal with things at Axonify. So all of our accounting systems are done in Sage Intacct, and Intacct is amazing. They can spit out really good reporting. But really where a lot of our benefit is derived from on the finance team side, we use an FP&A tool, or a financial planning and analysis tool called Vena. And the idea there is that we take everything from Sage Intacct and it integrates over with our Vena system, and we're able to spit out, and that's what creates our financial statements. That's what helps me create our budget versus actuals reporting that I send out to leaders monthly, where we're able to drill down on specific line items and numbers. And so if I wanted to see what were all the expenses in our travel budget for the sales team in the month of July, I can drill down in Vena and do that. And it shows all those transactions for me in there. And then it shows a lot of reporting year over year numbers that we built in there. So a lot of it comes from that tool. We like to keep the ERP as clean as we can and make sure that it's, data hygiene is really important to us. And then Vena is where I play around and figure out those whys and figure out the trends that are happening. And then the other tool that I use almost on a daily basis for our customer relationship management tool, we use Salesforce, which is pretty common in the industry. And it's pretty good at generating reports and dashboards for folks that need that information.
So then it sounds like you have considerable involvement in things like planning, budgeting, ongoing analysis, special projects across the board. I was wondering if maybe you can reflect on some of the peers that you graduated with, and maybe they found themselves at larger, more traditional corporate entities. Can you speak a bit about some of the roles and experiences that you have and working at Axonify, and think about it in terms of advantages and maybe disadvantages relative to some of your peers?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So one example that I have a friend who's working a similar role. He works for Dell right now, and he's doing a program there. So much bigger company, and he and I talk a lot about the differences in our job and what's going on. I think for me, one thing that I always kind of need to take a step back and remember is when I do financial planning and analysis, I'm a team of one at Axonify. So, and because we're the size that we are, and we have reporting that needs to go out to lender, we have a significant lender, we have a major private equity ownership stake. So I like to think of it that everything that happens in these large companies still needs to happen in our Axonify company. Maybe it's on a smaller scale, but a lot of that reporting is similar. There might be a little bit less of it. We don't need to do compliance reporting or anything like that, but I'm a team of one that gets a lot of support from the other members on our finance team. So we have our CFO, John Vukovic, And then our VP of Finance, Reed Tarbush, who's actually an MAC graduate as well. They provide me a lot of support as we go through the process. But again, I'm a team of one reporting out to all of our executives and our C-suite members and our VPs, and working with them really closely to make sure that, our budget for the year is set and we're able to present something that makes sense for all of our ownership and our lenders, and providing them updates throughout the year on reforecasting that we're doing, our budget versus actual. So, I think that's an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage being I get exposure to all that, being able to do that and learn how to do that and forging those relationships with really high level folks in the organization. The disadvantage is obviously, sometimes it takes a couple 3 a.m. nights to figure that out. And, when you got busy periods going on like we do right now with our budget season, it can get busy. But I think that overall, I look at it as a positive. I don't think there's, I will trade being able to learn all that key information and learn those key skills over a couple late nights any day of the week, for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of independent learning. So thinking, I guess, reflecting on what you're up to these days, what keeps you up at night as it relates to your work? If there's something that, and sorry, I didn't prep you with this one ahead of time, but I'm just curious, is there something that, you worry maybe isn't the right word, but you're often thinking about? I've heard from other leaders in SaaS-based spaces, cash is king and forecasting cash. And you talked about earlier, keeping the lights on 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. Is that still a challenge at Axonify, or are we past that and there's other bigger challenges that are that you can speak to that are on the top of your mind?
Yeah, for sure. So I think we're kind of past that stage at this point where we're not worried about keeping the company operational for the next month or the next year. But what we're seeing right now in the industry is a lot of headwinds with people pulling back on budgets, especially related to investing in software. So we have our targets, we have our ARR targets for the year, and we have our churn targets, and churn, for those of you who don't know, is just essentially ARR that's leaving the company. So those customers that aren't coming back and they're leaving. So we have those targets set for the year. And as we kind of go along and we track, everything that we do when we set up the budget stems from those ARR targets. So, if we don't hit those targets, we're going to be behind on cash for the year. We're going to be behind on revenue for the year. And a lot of it comes up to us trying to figure out how to turn around expenses for the year then. So making sure that the expenses are able to manage with everything there. So, I think what keeps me up at night really is, so the ARR is one thing, cash, making sure we're not burning through cash. Those are the biggest two. And then I think any time that we have big expenditures going on. So one example that we just had is we do a user conference every couple of years. We did the first one since COVID this past month. It's a big undertaking. A lot of people fly out. We did it in Nashville this year. There's a lot of expenses that go into it. We invite a lot of our customers there. And it's, if you think of Steve Jobs when he used to present the new Apple phones, that's essentially what we're doing there. We're releasing new products. We're talking about how to improve usage of our current products. So really a big undertaking. So for me, I don't go to those events, but I sit there for those 3 days and I wait for the expenses to come in. And I'm just praying that they come in under budget. So that's what keeps me up at night, making sure that we're able to stay within what we're looking for there. Cash is king. Bookings are king. Those are really what we do because, we need to stay within that budget. We have a lot of, because of those revenue pressures, we're seeing lots of pressure from investors. And this isn't just us. This is across the board right now in the SaaS world. Lots of investor pressure to meet those targets. And so we do what we can to meet them.
So one measure that always jumped out at me as somewhat unique to the SaaS space is cost of acquisition, or CAC-related costs. For some of us that maybe are less experienced in the SaaS-based space, could you describe that cost or that metric? It seems pretty unique to SaaS-based, and And some of the expenses you were referring to, do those fall under what we would call CAC, or do you see them as somewhat distinct?
Yeah, for sure. So cost of acquisition, we really look at as our sales and marketing expenses. So sales and marketing expenses, they go into that acquisition, and then we're looking for a ratio where we're able to recapture all those expenses through our revenue. And it's funny, we're actually looking at this ratio right now. It's something that we've tracked, but haven't really looked at in a lot of detail until really recently. So the event that I was talking about, we call it Axonify. The expenses that go in there, that relate to our cost of customer acquisition or the CAC. So yeah, we look at sales and marketing expenses there.
Let me jump in, just maybe half answer a question that's been posted again in chat and has all kinds of likes. Quick summary, and then I'll throw the question in. So, people have been listening carefully. Sounds like a lot of what you do all by yourself is similar to what your buddy at Bell would do, probably with lots of people sitting around him. You've got some different measures. So you got ARR and churn and CAC. You've seen a different focus in the business, and that's probably more a function of how the business grew. So certainly that big focus on let's make sure we have enough cash tomorrow at the start, to now worrying about how much your marketing people are spending on that conference. But if you were going to sort of come back and say, what's the big difference in your mind between your role and your buddy at Bell? Is it knowledge? Is it skills? Is it culture? What's keeping you there instead of going to work with your buddy at Bell and having lots more time to play golf?
Yeah, I think it is that culture. And again, I've been with the company off and on it's coming up on 7 years now. So there's that idea of almost wanting to finish what we've started. And I've seen the company grow. What would be the percentage of ARR? If we're coming up on 300 to 400% in ARR growth since I joined the company back when I did my first co-op. So
just put that into, you talked about scaling. When you joined, you said there's about, you've doubled the people count. But revenue's gone up 4 times instead of 2 times. So if people are trying to understand scalability of SaaS, that's a really good example. Exactly.
Yeah. Again, and we weren't immune to it when COVID hit. We really tried to scale up the team, and we had to cut back on some folks there. But and I think one thing that's impressive, considering that we've done 2 transactions and we've added employee counts through that. So it's not even just naturally building employees. I think we did 2 acquisitions where we acquired, I think one we acquired about 60 employees and the other was about 15 employees. So yeah, we've been able to grow really impressively with the team that we've had, brought on some really key folks that have helped bring the business to the next level. And then the 2 founders we have, so Carol Lehman, who's our CEO, and Christine Tutzel, who's our CRO, incredible. They've done great work. But I think, again, to answer the question, a lot of it goes back to finishing what we've started. I think that there's something new for me every day. And I think, and even every year, there's something new that is kind of the focus of what we're doing on the finance team that really keeps it exciting. We're not doing the same thing over and over and over again. So one example that I can give, 2022, I think it was. So last year, our focus was on our product management team. So making sure that they were as efficient as they could be. They were building out things that were going to help current customers, future customers, and trying to figure out how to generate value from there and figure out how to quantify the benefit we were getting from the investments that we were putting in. That's kind of the first time that we had looked at something like that. This year, we've changed our focus over to the marketing team. So how do we make sure that our marketing team is efficient? How do we generate metrics that show how efficient they are? Building out a team that really we're able to gain as much value as we possibly can out of what we're putting into the business and the expenses that we're accruing with the marketing team. 2021, when I first joined, was really about trying to plan for the future in terms of acquisition. So making sure the company and the development team and the product team could support bringing in a customer a company that we were going to integrate products with. So there's all these little things that change from year over year and focuses, trying to make sure that we're as efficient as we can be. That I love about it. Next year there'll be something. Who knows what we'll look at, but we'll look at something and try to make sure we're as efficient as possible.
So if we think of skills in the broader sense, that ability to learn and that curiosity has probably done you very well. Adam, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm fascinated about this, the future of the SaaS-based model, and you've got great experience in that space. So if we imagine we have a crystal ball, your crystal ball, and you're looking into it, is there anything you see in terms of the evolution of SaaS-based businesses generally, or maybe Axonify specifically, that you're able to share with us? And if you can, this is sort of the second part of that question. What kind of skills or qualities, or for someone who wants to get into that field, or if I want to be an employee in the future in a SaaS-based space, what might I put my time towards so that I'm upskilled to take advantage of those opportunities?
Yeah, for sure. So my crystal ball, again, just predicting where the industry is going to go. I think we might be not completely done with, but one of the things that I think was unique about SaaS companies is early on when they were building up and scaling and growing, there was no regard for cost whatsoever. It was just spend as much as you possibly could, build this into something that eventually could continue to grow, and growth was so important. Everything was focused on ARR growth. All the valuations were done on ARR and how much you were able to grow the business. One example that I have for the 433 students who took it with me last term, we did Lyft as our capstone case company. Lyft, this huge growing conglomerate, has never turned a profit. Uber, I don't think has still ever turned a profit. And these are these SaaS companies that are growing. I think as the industry evolves, we're going to see less of that. I think we're kind of at the point where the bubble hasn't burst, but the bubble has kind of condensed itself. And there's so much pressure now from private equity. They're looking for their returns faster, and returns are no longer just those revenue growth rates. One of the things that we track, and has become kind of an industry standard at this point, it's called the Rule of 40. And the idea there is that's your revenue growth rate and some profitability metric. If you add those two up, they need to equal 40%, that is. So again, if you have a company that's growing at 30%, which is kind of an industry standard, that's awesome. But that metric suggests that you need to pair it with that 10% profitability now. So I think, companies will still burn as they're growing. That's just the expectation. But I think, we're going to see these companies have to scale back and become more profitable more quickly than I think the pressure was earlier. So that's my crystal ball. That's what I expect there. In terms of skills that I think, if you're looking to enter the SaaS space and looking to make a difference early on, you have to go in with an open mind. You have to be able to enter the job space and know that you're not going to understand and know everything, and be willing to be taught and molded and go above and beyond to, take that extra step and learn. Skills that I used very early on that were super important. Just learning what SaaS metrics are, doing your research beforehand, learning what's important to a business, how to track success and failure. Excel skills are huge. Being able to financial model, especially if you're going into a finance role, and be able to model those metrics and those skills are super important. And then, like I said, there's just tons of webinars and podcasts and things out there that people can go to learn about SaaS. You don't need to be an expert when you walk in. Not many folks are. They're willing to learn and willing to teach you along the way. So really kind of get those skills down and be willing to be molded would be my advice.
I love that. The idea of having that learning orientation, the willingness to try it, talked about earlier, the willingness to fail and learn from it. There aren't forms where you could just type your question in and someone on the other end says, here's your answer. It takes a bit of insight and active searching, which I think are fantastic skills. We're getting close to the end of our time together. So I want to hit you with our wrap-up question. We often give our guests an opportunity to share one or two pieces of advice that maybe they would have loved to hear in their fourth year. And it doesn't have to be specific to SaaS and career, just a nice piece of advice that you think maybe our students would benefit from.
Yeah, I think it would be never be afraid to try something new. And I know that's coming from someone who did all 4 co-op terms at the same place and now works there full time. But I think it's in a unique industry that not a lot of my friends have gone in. And I think, I was there in school, and I know there was the pressure, the external pressure that you want to work in an accounting firm and do the audit and do the tax role. I know that's where most of our grads go, but don't be afraid to try something new. There's tons of different opportunity out there, whether it's in SaaS or whether it's something else. People are coming up with crazy ideas right now. Even at UW with the Velocity program, there's tons of new things being developed, tons of things going on. So yeah, don't be afraid to try something new. You're at the point now where you're finishing your degree. If you decide to do the MAC, there's another 8 months there, but you're really kind of beginning that next phase of your life. And there's tons of opportunity to change what you're doing. And if you didn't like your co-op term, or even if you did, there's tons of opportunity to try something new. So that's my one piece of advice.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you nicely paired it with your CPA designation. And so opening those doors, I think your career so far is a great example of what success could look like if you have that orientation. So, well, I think that's our time together. Let me just say a big thank you, Ben, to you for your time and for your insights and for our conversation today. I know, speaking for Nancy, that we greatly appreciate it. So thank you.